And on the northern flank of that low, the likelihood of disruptive snowfall for parts of northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome once again to On the Money, where we're focused on the UK's cost of living crisis, helping you to beat the squeeze. I'm Liam Halligan, and for the next hour, we'll be talking about those rising prices as inflation hits a new 30-year high. We're talking sports sponsorship in Bristol as a UK challenger to Amazon splashes the cash. And we make a plea to GB News viewers and listeners. Get in touch. We want you on this show. All that and more after the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's 1 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Russia's envoy to the EU says he doesn't expect any escalation in the Ukrainian crisis in the coming weeks, while President Putin says he's open to continuing dialogue. Now, that follows claims by Russia that they're withdrawing troops from the border. But the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace warns there's no evidence of military de-escalation and actually says 60% of Russia's land combat power is stationed at Ukraine's border. NATO defence ministers are meeting in Brussels today. The organisation's Secretary-General, Jens Stoltenberg, is due to speak in the next few minutes. As soon as that happens, we'll bring it to you live here on GB News. The Met Police has launched an investigation into allegations of cash for honours. In a statement, they said it relates to media reports claiming that offers of help were made to secure honours and citizenship for a Saudi national. Police officers have been liaising with the Prince of Wales charity, the Prince's Foundation, as part of their initial investigations. No arrests have been made. Prince Andrew's facing renewed calls to give up one of his last remaining major titles, Duke of York, after agreeing to settle the civil sex assault claim brought against him by Virginia Giuffre. The royal's already been stripped of his honorary military roles and the title of His Royal Highness. Well, Prince Andrew says he regrets his association with the disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein and has agreed to make a substantial donation to Miss Giuffre's charity. Well, legal partner Alan Collins says it's a good outcome for both parties.
I think it sends a very clear message, particularly to victims and survivors who have possibly not come forward. But actually, if you do come forward and you do disclose the fact that you've been abused as a child, you will be taken seriously. It doesn't matter where you come from in society, you will be listened to.
Higher prices in clothing, rising costs of some household goods and rising rents have caused a further rise in the cost of living. Inflation's risen by 5.5% in the 12 months to January of this year. That's a near 30-year high. Well, our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, says inflation is outpacing the growth of wages, putting pressure on household budgets. Meanwhile, across the UK, house prices increased by more than 10% in the year to December. Official figures show the UK average house price rose £275 to £1,000. Freddie Poser from Priced Out told GB News there aren't enough properties across the country.
Unfortunately, house prices have been continuing to skyrocket for years now, and the government isn't doing nearly enough to sort that out. So it means that more young people are going to be priced out of the market will remain completely inefficient, and it won't work for the average Briton.
Children between the ages of 5 and 11 in Scotland are going to be offered a COVID vaccination. Nicola Sturgeon made the announcement today. Yesterday, Wales became the first country in the United Kingdom to announce it would be vaccinating children in the same age group. At least 7 people have died after a Spanish trawler sank off the eastern coast of Canada yesterday. 3 crew members were rescued from a life raft in the Atlantic, suffering from severe hypothermia. Spain's Fisheries Ministry says the Villa de Piatancho trawler launched a distress beacon at 4 a.m. on Tuesday. The vessel sank around 280 miles southeast of Newfoundland. The Met Office is warning 90-mile-per-hour winds brought by Storm Dudley could pose a danger to life. Amber weather warnings are in place across central and southern Scotland and the north of England. ScotRail has announced some of its services will stop at 4 p.m. today for safety. Swindon Town Football Club is trying to find a 6-and-a-half-year-old boy called Joe, who says he can't attend matches because his mum has no money for food. Well, Joe wrote a letter to the club and sent star player Harry McCurdy 26 pence in the post. The club tweeted his note and they're trying to get in touch with him. Well, as I promised earlier, we can go live to Brussels now, where the NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg is giving opening remarks at the Conference of Defence Ministers.
Russia has amassed an invasion force on the borders of Ukraine. At the same time, there are signs from Moscow that diplomacy should continue. This gives grounds for cautious optimism. However, we have not so far seen any sign of de-escalation on the ground. NATO is not a threat to Russia, and we remain ready to engage in dialogue and find a diplomatic way forward. But while we continue to work for the best, we must also be prepared for the worst. We will do what is necessary to protect and defend all allies. We have already raised the readiness of the NATO response force, and allies are putting forces on standby and deploying more troops, planes and ships. Today, we will consider how we should enhance our deterrence and defence posture and pursue our diplomatic efforts. And let me now thank the media for joining us at the beginning of the meeting, and the meeting will continue in just a moment.
In Brussels, hearing there the opening remarks from the NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg as that meeting commences of the defence ministers, making very clear they're going to consider their defence, but also what they can do to pursue diplomatic efforts to try and de-escalate the current crisis between Russia and Ukraine. You are now up to date here on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens today and keep you across this developing story. But now let's head back to Liam for On the Money.
And coming up on The Money today, we're talking price rises as UK inflation hits yet another 30-year high. Prices during January were up on average by 5.5% compared to the same month in 2021. So why does the actual rise in the cost of living feel so much higher? We're in Jaywick in Essex, one of the UK's most deprived areas, where GB News examines the cost of living squeeze at the sharp end. Plus, our in-depth Money Talks interview today is with 2 men from Bristol who've masterminded a major new sports sponsorship deal in the west of England. That's later in the show. Above all, On the Money is about helping you to tackle the rising cost of living. We want to hear about your experiences and concerns. Email me now at a new email address, beatthesqueeze@gbnews.uk, or tweet @GBNews. We want to know about your efforts to make ends meet, making GB News viewers and listeners a central part of this show. So stay with us. This is GB News on TV and DAB+ digital radio. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're on the money. The UK is now in the middle of the most serious cost of living crisis since the 1970s. Millions of families up and down the land are now feeling the squeeze. New government figures suggest prices in January were 5.5% higher than in the same month in 2021. That means inflation is now at a new 30-year high. The cost of pretty much everything seems to be rising faster than our ability to pay, from food and utility bills to filling up on petrol or diesel. Many would argue that the cost of living rise we're all experiencing is actually much sharper than the 5.5% official inflation number. The average price of a litre of petrol, for instance, was £1.16 in January 2021, rising to £1.45 this January. That's a 25% increase. Domestic gas and electricity bills are up 20 to 30% over the last year, and that's before another steep increase in utility bills due in April. So I wonder why the headline Consumer Price Index, or CPI, rate of inflation we hear so much about in the news is only 5.5%, because inflation feels much higher. And as prices keep rising, average wages are going up much more slowly, with many, of course, receiving no wage rise at all. So millions of households are now suffering a drop in living standards, which the Bank of England warns will continue throughout 2022. Here at GB News, we're determined to help our viewers and listeners beat this cost of living squeeze. This show provides jargon-free explanations of what's happening to prices and why. And our guests, expert but friendly, provide tips and ideas to help you tackle the cost of living increases. GB News programmes, of course, will keep up the pressure for action to help households make ends meet. What we really need, though, is you, right here on this show, helping us exert pressure on ministers to help, in turn, hard-pressed families. So do email me at beatthesqueeze@gbnews.uk. Tell us your experiences and concerns. We'll get in touch and ask some of you to appear on air. So today, unusually, On the Money isn't posing a question, but we're making a plea. GB News says, let's beat the squeeze together. Today, I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by Louise Oliver. She's a financial advisor. Very good to see you in the On the Money studio. Thanks for coming in. And we've invited back Neil Sharlick of Street Angels. That's a food bank in Kent, which is struggling to keep up with rising demands as more people are in need of their services. Neil, let's go to you first. Thanks so much for joining me here on The Money again. Firstly, thank you for all the work that you do for the community in your part of the country. What did you think when you saw these inflation numbers this morning? 5.5%? Do you think the cost of living is going up faster than that?
I think if they're saying 5.5%, that must be true, because nobody would fiddle the figures, would they? That's definitely going to be true if someone's told us that. I think, to us, we've doubled the costs. In the last year, our costs have doubled. So these charities are out there actually helping people, food banks and other charities supporting people. Our costs are increasing, so our fuel, our gas, electric, the cost of us buying food, collecting the food to give to people is astronomical. We fed 10,000 people last month. We're struggling to keep up with demand ourselves.
Louise, tell us about the situation as you see it. You deal with lots of individuals thinking about financial issues, low income and middle income and higher income. You talk to lots and lots of businesses. How real do you think this cost of living squeeze is?
Liam, it's extremely real. It's a complete worry for many, many people. Of course, it affects some people more than others. We are all in it together. But if we look at the last couple of years, some people have managed to save more money. We've had lockdown after lockdown, so they've been able to accumulate cash. So those people might be in a better position to weather the increased prices. There are other people on fixed income, perhaps they're retired, they have an annuity that doesn't go up at all with inflation. We have seen state pension increases at 3.1%. That'll kick in April, which is
a lot lower than inflation.
It's a lot lower than inflation. It's another £5 a week, but that will lose ground with inflation. So, and we've got people with young families, already feeling the squeeze. Perhaps they've just come out of, in and out of work through the pandemic. So they will really feel it. So, what measures can they take? There's things that they can do to focus on looking at essential expenditure versus discretionary expenditure and just seeing how they can riddle that down and work on reducing that wherever they can.
There is going to be lots of belt tightening, and I'm sure Neil sees a lot of that. I guess what I was getting at, Neil, is that we all highlight the consumer price index, the CPI, the retail price index, the RPI, which we used to focus on. That's about 7.5% now. It includes housing costs. It treats fuel costs a little bit differently. I wanted to ask you, what kind of households, if you like, are now coming to your food bank? In the food bank in my local town, where my family volunteers, we used to see mostly lower income families. Now we see families who previously thought of themselves as comfortably off, and they're feeling the squeeze as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. We started off originally as a homeless charity. We were actually just feeding the street homeless. That then went on to supported housing, people on low income. Now we're getting people come to the food bank in full-time employment. They just can't make ends eat. It's getting horrendous for everybody out there. We've had people who supported us through the first lockdown have now then come to us and saying they're no longer able to support us. They need support themselves. And we're open to everybody. We're more than happy to help anyone. So these people come along. I think there's a lot of, as you say, your family, again, my family do as well. Volunteer for me, your family volunteer for a local food bank. It's getting horrendous. I think that's the one thing we're struggling with, is enough people to actually help us. We've grown so big and we're feeding so many people. We need more volunteers.
Very interesting. Louise, another part of an inflation rise, of course, that we've seen today up to a new 30-year high makes much more likely, doesn't it, that next month the Bank of England will raise interest rates again. They're still quite low by historic standards. They're at 0.5%. Almost certainly, it seems to me, I'll chance my arm on this, we're going to see an increase to 0.75% or even 1% in March as the Bank of England tries to tackle inflation. We know there are 2 or 3 million households in the UK with those variable rate mortgages, but a lot more people have personal debts who will have to pay more in debt service.
Yeah, I totally agree. The long-term average for interest rates is somewhere between 6 and 7%, and we're of an age where we remember the 70s.
Well, I am. I wasn't going to say that to you.
High inflation, thank you. High inflation, 25% inflation in 1975. And we have a whole generation
they don't know that, do they?
who've never experienced high inflation or high interest rates. So long-term average inflation, 2.6%. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Bank of England do increase interest rates. They're expecting to do so in order to, retract that monetary supply so people have less to spend. I have to say that people are going to have less to spend anyway as we go through this sort of squeeze. So
we're meant to be in the middle of what we used to call a V-shaped recovery. This was going to be the great bounce back. The Treasury saying the UK economy is going to expand at 6.5% this year. I don't see that happening.
But it's all about confidence. So we know we've had a massive demonstration of this, haven't we, through the global pandemic. People go out, you and I go out, we buy things, we're going to get a haircut or go buy some new jeans from M&S. That drives the economy. What's going to happen now is we're going to slam the anchors on and people will think, you know what, actually, I will make do with those jeans that I've got. I might just not have my hair cut for a little bit longer. So that lack of confidence is going to affect business. Not only that, we have national insurance increases. And I've spoken to quite a few of my women entrepreneurs in my group. They are worried, NI increases. And if you've got a business that relies on a workforce, that will go straight off your bottom line. And also, if you're...
It's a tax on jobs, isn't it? A national insurance rise for employers and employees. It's a tax on consumer spending and a tax on jobs.
And the energy. So if you have a business that relies on having lights on and, cookers like, you would have for hospitality, that's going to have a massive impact. And if I am lacking confidence to go out and go for a meal or go to cinema or the theatre, again, we're back to hospitality, to leisure, to retail. They're only just clawing their way back. These people employ staff and they might think twice about taking more people on with this NI increase. They might be laying staff off, so we're back to that again. And also, I think it will promote the black economy.
The informal economy, right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, stuff off the books.
Not formal contracts.
That's another feature of the 70s and 80s, isn't it?
So Rishi Sunak, if he wants to win some brownie points right now, scrap the NI increase. Do it, because it's much better than giving people a £200 loan off their energy bill that have to pay back over 5 years. It's not targeted. He needs to scrap that. He's still got time to do it. Win some brownie points.
Let's come back to that after the break. Louise Oliver, financial advisor, and Neil Sharlick, who works with Street Angels, doing heroic work with food banks there in Kent. We're going to continue this conversation over the break. We're going to talk about some tips, what you can do to try and beat the squeeze. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. After the break, we will continue this discussion and we'll cross over to Jaywick in Essex, one of Britain's most deprived areas where residents are feeling the harsh impact of this cost of living crisis. Stay with us. You're On the Money.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern. 2 named storms in the next 48 hours are likely to bring disruption to many and dangerous wind speeds to some. Storm Dudley later today and then Storm Eunice on Friday. The rain ahead of Dudley already pushing in across much of the UK. Bands of heavy and persistent rain pushing eastwards across northern and western England, Wales, and for a time Scotland and Northern Ireland. That falling as hill snow for the north of Scotland, but with southwesterly winds picking up strength elsewhere, it's actually a very mild day for the vast majority, 15, 16 Celsius possible in the south. Then the spells of rain move through, but the wind really picks up through the evening. 70 and in some places 80-mile-per-hour wind gusts. The worst hit areas, Central Belt, southern Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland and northern England. Risk of disruption from those wind speeds and risk of some damaging wind speeds in some places. It's windy everywhere through the night and there'll be blustery showers, longer spells of rain and hill snow for northern Scotland. And it's going to be cold in the north, but milder further south as we start off the day tomorrow. A bright start, and although it's a windy day again tomorrow, the winds will be coming down following the overnight strengths. And for many, it's a day of sunny spells and blustery showers. Again, hill snow for Scotland. Showers hit and miss elsewhere, with some brighter interludes in between. 11 Celsius in the south, for the likes of Southampton and Plymouth. I think 5 to 8 Celsius for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Into Thursday evening then, clear at first. The winds drop away at first, but the next spell of rain starts to move into southwest England, south and west Wales by the evening. And this is Storm Eunice very quickly rushing across the UK, and it's during Friday morning that it's likely to bring damaging and even dangerous wind speeds of 80 to 90 mile per hour for West Wales, South Wales, Bristol Channel coast and southwest coast. And on the northern flank of that low, the likelihood of disruptive snowfall for parts of northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome back. It's 1:23. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. As inflation hits yet another 30-year high, we're talking about falling living standards with wages going up slower than prices. The Bank of England warns that will continue throughout 2022. That's why we want you to help us, to help you beat the squeeze by asking you to appear here on GB News, helping us to exert pressure on ministers to then help hard-pressed families. I'm still with my expert panel. Neil Sharlick joins us from Kent, where he works with the Street Angels Food Bank. Neil, I'm sure you and your fellow volunteers and the families using your food bank talk about the cost of living squeeze a lot. What kind of tips and ideas are people sharing? Sometimes it does come down to the basics, doesn't it? Turn your heating off, turn the lights off, try and use less energy.
I think a lot of people are turning to the voluntary sector in general, whether it's food banks, soup kitchens, organisations that are offering help while we've been in this trouble. And I think the voluntary sector has been very strong. In Medway, in Kent, where we are, we've got a very strong voluntary sector, and it's been amazing, the support that people have had. It is a concern for everybody. We can give out so much stuff, things like blankets, warm clothing. We give out school uniforms, sanitary products, cleaning products, anything really we can get donated to us. We then pass on to people who need it. But I can't see it's going to get any easier anytime soon, sadly, for people. I think people are going to carry on having to tighten the belt and struggle, sadly. And we do our bit, and there's lots of organisations that are doing their bit. As long as people keep supporting us, the government keeps supporting the voluntary sector, hopefully we'll all get through it okay.
Louise Oliver, I wouldn't be so presumptuous, but you did say earlier that you remember some of the 70s and the early 80s, where times were tough, weren't they? I was growing up here in London, you were growing up in Sheffield. I started the show today by talking about the 70s, saying this is the worst cost of living crisis since the 70s. What about this time reminds you of then?
I think it's just to do with people, thinking about their expenditure. It's a worry. The difference now is that we have a generation of spenders.
Not savers.
Not savers.
People have lost the savings habit, haven't they? A lot of people.
They've lost the savings. And the worry is credit is readily available now. In the 70s, we didn't have credit cards.
And there was more of a social stigma then against credit, wasn't there, when we were kids?
There certainly was. So I worry about, the payday loan companies are going to be rubbing their hands together at the minute. I really worry about that and people going into debt. So my advice is for people to look at that essential expenditure. Have a look at things like household insurances, car insurances. See if there's any wriggle room.
All your outgoings. Go through all your outgoings. All those direct debits.
Absolutely. I looked at mine, and when you look at insurances, for example, car insurance, I found out that I was covered 3 times for emergency recovery. RAC, green flag, AA.
And no one's going to ring you up and tell you you're overpaying, are they?
To rescue me. So see if there's anything, even in the policy, where you might be paying another tenner. But you just don't need it. We're apathetic,
That's 120 quid a year, isn't it, if you're paying an extra tenner a month?
That's it. So just take the time. I know it's dull. People don't like looking at their outgoings, partly because it's scary. We work with people, we challenge them to have a look at this all of the time. It doesn't matter how much your outgoings are. You can save money. And I think that will help. There's also looking at food waste. The biggest food item that's wasted, salad. Nobody feels like salad at this time of the year, do they? You buy it, stick it in the fridge, think you lose a few pounds in January, stick it in the bin a week later. So, it's just simple things like that. Also, how many of us bought a bicycle in lockdown? I bet it's collecting dust. This is real tongue-in-cheek stuff, Liam.
Yeah.
So
either use it or sell it, right?
Get on your bike or sell it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Get some money in the bank, see what there is there. Get on eBay.
Well, it's been great having you on, Louise. You're a very experienced commentator. Look forward to having you back on the show in the future with those pearls of wisdom. And, of course, Neil Sharlick of Street Angels Food Bank there in Gillingham in Kent. And let me say once again, Neil, from me and GB News to you and your fellow volunteers, thank you for the work that you do in your community. And we'll be carrying on, of course, with our cost of living discussions in On the Money tomorrow and in future days, weeks and months. Now, as we touched on yesterday, Jaywick Sands in Essex is officially listed as one of the most deprived areas of the UK. Residents there have been feeling the burden of this cost of living squeeze, worsened by the fact that very little levelling up money is being sent anywhere in the South East. Paul Hawkins, our national reporter, has been testing the mood.
The best things about Jaywick are the beach and the people.
Hi, David. Hey, you all right? How you doing? Yeah, good. Good to see you again.
David Booth embodies community spirit. He runs the Jaywick Sands Community Land Trust. For the past 18 months, his team have been running this food bank as well as the charity shop.
It's been really popular and busy, and we've got great community engagement. So yeah, it's really appreciated by the community.
Yeah. Why did you do it? Why did you set up the food bank?
It's a bit of a necessity, really, with the cost of living and everything else rising, and people on benefits or low incomes are really starting to struggle.
Almost every day they collect from a local supermarket. They're only open for 7.5 hours a week, but they give out at least 60 bags of food in that time.
It's very difficult. It is very difficult, just making ends meet. And there's days where I myself have to just put a knife and fork on a plate and leave it and not let my little one say that I'm not eating because I've got to put food on her plate. So when I come down here on a Tuesday, I know that we're both eating that night. I've barely got £10 a month left over to get food for me and my daughter after I've paid all my bills. It's getting ridiculous now. It's getting ridiculous now. We're having to sit there wrapped up in blankets and 3 layers of clothing because you just can't afford to have the heating on for an extra couple of hours.
Jaywick's got an unfair reputation from the media, but these are good, honest, happy people living on the very edge. It's not so much about the cost of living, it's about the cost of surviving. And here, it's been happening for too long. Many of the houses here weren't built for full-time living. Originally built as holiday homes in the 1930s, many people moved in permanently after their own houses were destroyed in the war. The result? Homes that are energy inefficient. How are you staying warm?
Well, I spend a lot of time upstairs in my bedroom in bed, which I'll show you. I've got 4 quilts.
Philomena lives by herself in Jaywick.
Can't afford to heat. I can't afford the heating.
Right.
No, it's too much.
Right.
£68 it's costing me
Right.
to heat this house. I wear my longer coat to bed because it covers up my legs if the quilts move.
Yeah, so then you've got the 4 quilts and the long coat on.
Yeah. This is my kitchen.
Yeah.
I love cooking, but I can't afford to do it. Yeah, look at my fridge, it's empty. You know, as soon as I get my money, it's gone.
Yeah, okay.
On just keeping warm.
Yeah.
Can't do my washing up. When I feel like it's got too much, I'll go upstairs, put the boiler on, heat up the water. If I forget to turn it off, I have anxiety attack.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really affecting my mental health.
What does Jaywick need?
Investment. It needs people to come along and say, we can see the value in putting money into Jaywick to help it rejuvenate and to build it back up to what it can and should be.
What about Michael Gove, who's the Minister in charge of levelling up? Would you like him to come down here?
I would love him to come down here and explain why we haven't received anything from the levelling up. The most deprived place for the last 12 years. And not a penny of levelling up money. There's lots of things that we could spend money on that would make a huge difference to everyone.
Paul Hawkins, GB News.
Paul Hawkins there, reporting from Jaywick Sands on the Essex coast. Now, a spokesperson from the Department for Levelling Up told GB News Essex received £19.9 million of investment from the first round of the Levelling Up Fund as part of our plans to level up the whole country. This is on top of £4 million to deliver a vibrant new market, commercial centre and bespoke bike scheme within Jaywick Sands. It's for councils to decide where investment should be prioritised in their area, and unsuccessful bidders have been offered feedback and will be able to bid again in the spring. It's 1:32. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Coming up, we take a look at soaring house prices in the UK. Good news if you're an owner. More of the cost of living squeeze if you're not, as official figures show the average UK house rose to £275,000 last year. That's after the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's 1:33. I'm Rosie Wright here to keep you up to date on GB News. Russia's envoy to the EU says he doesn't expect any escalation in the Ukrainian crisis in the coming weeks. Now, that follows claims by Russia that they're withdrawing troops from the border. At NATO's defence ministers' meeting in Brussels, the Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg said that while there was no evidence of this, President Putin's desire for continued dialogue supports the case for cautious optimism. Prince Andrew's facing renewed calls to give up one of his last remaining major titles, Duke of York, after agreeing to settle the civil sex assault claim brought against him by Virginia Giuffre. The royal has already been stripped of his honorary military roles and his title of His Royal Highness. Prince Andrew says he regrets his association with the disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein and has agreed to make a substantial donation to Miss Giuffre's charity. The Met Police has launched an investigation into allegations of cash for honours. In a statement, they said it relates to media reports claiming offers of help were made to secure honours and citizenship for a Saudi national. Police officers have been liaising with the Prince of Wales charity, the Prince's Foundation, as part of their initial investigations. No arrests have been made yet. The cost of living has increased further, with inflation rising by 5.5% in the 12 months to January 2022. That's reaching now a near 30-year high. And it's higher prices in clothing, rising costs from household goods and increases in rent that were key factors behind the increase. Children between the ages of 5 and 11 in Scotland are going to be offered a COVID vaccination. Nicola Sturgeon made the announcement today. Yesterday, Wales became the first country in the United Kingdom to announce it will be vaccinating children in the same age group. You're now up to date here on GB News. Don't forget, we're not just on your TV, but online, DAB plus radio too. Shortly, we'll be back to On the Money with Liam.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 1:37. You're with GB News Television and DAB Plus Digital Radio, and you're on the money. Now, lots of you have been emailing on this cost of living crisis. Emailing beat the squeeze at gbnews.uk. Seb says, I'm nearly 30 and cannot for the life of me afford to get on the property ladder. Seb, we get so many emails along the same lines. I came out of the RAF during lockdown and now I'm facing an impossible situation where my fiancée and I can't even find somewhere to live. The cost of living in the housing market is costing me, quotes, the best years of my life, says Seb. And Kathleen got in touch to say it used to be said that the only thing Labour was good for was spending other people's money. Now this can be said about the so-called Conservatives. This government is not responding to the cost of living crisis for the majority of people who actually voted for them. It is intolerable. Barbara got in touch. I think it's always about the amount of money a person receives, but how it's used, given that bad habits of extravagance in better times are hard to break. The expression tightening your belt is rarely heard now, probably just like by oldies like myself. Well, it's a fair comment, but I do think it's a lot harder for today's young people to get on the housing ladder, to make their way, than it was for my generation. And I'm never going to stop saying that. I believe it's the truth. Now, as the cost of living squeeze continues to tighten, figures published just this morning show that the average UK house price increased by 11.8% over the year to December 2021. This comes as UK inflation, as we've been reporting, hit a 30-year high of 5.5%. The average house price in December last year was £275,000. That's £27,000 up on the year before. All this means that house prices in southern England in particular have doubled in the last decade. Now, GB News East of England reporter Amelia Harper joins us now. Amelia, always good to see you here on The Money. But for a lot of youngsters, rising house prices aren't good news, are they?
No, really not good news, and I'll come on to this in a second because I've been speaking to people in and around where I am here in St Albans in Hertfordshire about this. But this has all come about because the ONS has released those new statistics this morning about average UK house prices. And we know that the UK average house price has gone up now by 10.8% over the last year to December 2021. As you said, an increase of £27,000 if we actually put that into what you'd be whipping out of your purse or your wallet. Now, first thing this morning, that figure was 10.7, so it's gone up a little bit, running from November 2021 to December 2021. But look, Liam, let's widen this out a little bit more and look at how this is rolling out essentially across the country, because homes in the south asking prices have doubled over the last decade. Let's not just forget that this is not just a phenomenon we've seen this year. This is an increase on increase on increase every single year. And if we look actually at the east of England here where I am, we've seen the largest increase in asking prices over that decade time period. In the whole country, that's gone up by 65% to prices at £396,000. And of course, people living here are not happy about it. The average asking price for a house in St Albans is around £615,000, and this is what worries people here.
Too high. I think for the young, sort of early to mid 20s, even there's just unless you're in a fortunate enough position to get the backing, you're just not really going to get to the stage until much later down the line to actually get on the property ladder.
We held out to sell. We then sold in a panic. We should have held on to the flat and waited to get a higher price for it, because now we've sold it and prices have gone up here so significantly that we're in a position where we're still renting, waiting for a property crash.
House prices are only driven by the availability of money and by demand. So if people can borrow the money, which they can, increase multiples of income, then that's what drives prices. And what I don't understand is government policy which stimulates demand for a product which is in short supply. So Help to Buy and everything else is stimulating demand when really the answer is to increase the supply.
Well, I think we can hear there, Liam, that younger people particularly are concerned, as you mentioned before I came on, about getting on that property ladder and being able to actually buy their first home. But two of the gentlemen there highlighting points that I've been hearing a lot more of, questions about government policy, things like the Help to Buy scheme. Because fundamentally, if you've got a lot of demand, which is then propped up by these schemes that help people to buy their homes, but you've not got the supply, where are you left then to go?
We need to build more houses. I've been saying it for many, many years. Great to have you on the show as ever. Amelia Harper, GB News East of England correspondent, speaking for her generation. From the south of England to the north, GB News, we're everywhere. Bradley Harris is in Manchester speaking with a local estate agent about house prices in the northwest. Bradley?
Yes, good afternoon, Liam. That's right. As Amelia said, house prices are increasing. What impact is that having on people buying and selling here in the north of England? Well, joining me now is Philippe Fabry, the director of Park Lane Estates. I just want to chat to you, Philippe, because this is an important time for people buying and selling. If they're buying for the first time, some people might be finding this a little bit difficult to grasp with house prices going up. But are you surprised, or were you expecting these kinds of figures from the Office for National Statistics?
To be honest, we're still expecting it. We're still running on a backlog from the stamp duty holiday that happened last year. The average time stretched to 6 months for a sale to go through. They're catching up a little bit on their backlog, but there's still a significant backlog, and we don't have enough supply. So the market's always supply and demand. The demand is still there, money is still cheap, and but we don't have the supply.
And of course, the pandemic has helped with the rise in costs. Of course, with properties that are 500,000 or under, that was tax-free. You had stamp duty that helped drive up costs as well. Just talk to me now, though. What kinds of properties are you seeing for sale, and what's the difference in price compared to this time last year?
Given a property as of yesterday, we're looking at a £50,000, a 20% increase, purely because of the lack of demand. What we're finding is that now that the cost of moving has escalated again, people are thinking a bit twice. More people are working from home or part-time, and the cost of an extension or the cost of making better use of their space is equivalent to the cost of moving. And then possibly not even having to move children to different schools or etc. Much more upheaval. So less people are putting their properties on the market.
And of course, the cost of living crisis is another factor as well. What advice do you have for first-time buyers who are looking to buy a house right now?
Save. Demonstrate that you are able to save with whatever your situation is at the moment. Look closely at the market. At the moment, the market is still rising, though the rate of rise is slowing. The Bank of England have put two messages out. One, that they want to put interest rates up, so the cost of borrowing is likely to go up, and that's a message to try and slow down the price of housing. But also they have possibly been a little bit too severe on their affordability instructions to lenders, and it looks like that some lenders are beginning to loosen up a little bit the affordability criteria. So where's that going to take us? I think different areas will get a hit slightly differently, but in this area in the northwest, especially in Greater Manchester, where there's still a political emphasis to sort of virtually create the second city of the country, we're still on a rise, and get in while you can at the moment, but make sure that you can afford it, both now and going forward.
Well, good to chat to you, Philip. Interesting to hear thoughts from an estate agent here in Urmston, Liam. The advice from here is to get in whilst you still can.
Very interesting, Brad. You know, I'm just sitting here doing some sums as I do, watching your excellent interview. If the average house price in the UK is now £275,000 and the average wage, I've just looked it up, is about £28,000. That's before, and then you pay tax on all that, of course. The average house price is now almost 10 times the average salary. When I bought my first home, it was 4 times, and that is the problem. We need to build more homes. Not just a southeast phenomenon. West Country, northwest, lots of our coastal communities, parts of Wales and Scotland, youngsters being priced out. Bradley Harris, thank you so much for joining us here on The Money. It's time now for my daily interview series, Money Talks. And today I have not one, but two special guests. Dialing in is Stephen Lansdowne. He's the co-founder of the financial services firm Hargreaves Lansdowne and owner of Bristol Sport, which oversees the business of a number of affiliated clubs, including Bristol City Football Club. And Bristol Sport's teamed up with Haboo, an e-commerce fulfilment company co-founded by Martin Bish, a previous Money Talks guest. Martin, great to see you here back in the On The Money studio. Thank you so much for joining us. So it's Martin Bish and Stephen Lansdowne, my latest guests on Money Talks. Let's go to you first, Stephen. Thank you so much for joining us. Tell us about Bristol Sport, what it is, before we get into the new deal that you've just done with Mr. Bish here.
Well, Bristol Sport is, if you like, the overseeing company of the sporting companies that we're involved with in Bristol, which is the Bristol City Football Club, which you mentioned, Bristol Bears Rugby, and Bristol Flats Basketball. So I'm so pleased with the deal we've done with Haboo today for them to sponsor all five of our teams there and give us some much valuable support.
Just before we get into that sponsorship deal and why it works for you and works for Haboo, just tell us a little bit about how Bristol Sport fared during lockdown. It's been a really tough time for lots of football clubs. Bristol City, of course, is a major football club, but we're seeing major football clubs getting into financial trouble. I'm not saying that's an issue down there in Bristol, but it has been a tough time, hasn't it, for many sports clubs during this pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. So March 2020, what happened? We were told to stay home. We stopped playing. Therefore, we stopped our income source immediately. Our expenses kept going. So all we could do was generate losses and try and curtail our expenditure as much as possible and survive the pandemic. The fact that so many clubs are still going is a testament to some good housekeeping, I think, across the board. But generally speaking, people such as myself, owners, have had to bail out the clubs and keep them going. So it's a difficult time, and we're sort of clawing our way back now that we're back to crowds being back in stadiums. But funny enough, talking about inflation is probably the big lesson in football in that now, because we don't have the demand for players that we had before. We have to be more cautious on what we can pay, and the transfer window that's just gone just illustrates that. It was by previous transfer windows a very poor one for the amount of money that exchanged hands.
Let's turn to Martin. It's great to have you back.
Thank you.
Viewers and listeners can catch up with an extended discussion between you and I, particularly about your fulfilment company, Haboo. It's like a challenger to Amazon, a different kind of model, on my Money Talks podcast on the GB News YouTube channel. Worth listening to it is as well, if I may say so. But you're here today because you've just done this deal with Hargreaves Lansdowne down in Bristol. Tell us about the sponsorship deal, why it works for your company.
We're really excited. I mean, Bristol Sport is an institution in Bristol, or a series of institutions. You know, Bristol City, Bristol Bears, Bristol Flyers, and then the women's teams as well. So it's 5 teams. So it spans a huge range of fans, much larger than any other single sports deal I think could possibly hope to. And so it allows us to reach out to what is our community. That's where our head office is based. That's where we built the business. It's where most of our employees are. I mean, we hired 500 people in Bristol just last year. So for us, it's an exciting opportunity to support the talent that are out there and hopefully attract more of them, to give our employees more increased pride in Haboo by buying into the sports that they love. And of course, it also means massive kind of exercising brand awareness. It lifts our brand, not just in Bristol, but wherever those Bristol teams play, and they play not just across the UK, but quite often across Europe as well. So it's a series of exciting opportunities for us.
Now, I remember when we met before, we discussed how important sport has been to you and I in our lives so far. How important it is as a release for people, and how people really felt the lack of support, and team sports in particular, during the pandemic. Do you see signs? Bristol's a vibrant, bustling place, of course, huge cultural life. Do you see signs now that we're getting back those benefits of sport, signs that you want to be connected with, really?
We do. You know, we're coming out of COVID. I think we all feel like it's over. We certainly pray that it's over. And we, you know, we have our own teams that you know, play football for us and want to start more teams. And I think we can work with Bristol Sport and with the foundation that Bristol Sport have set up to work in the wider community and help spread the good word via sport and via other activities. Already we work with the homeless in the community. I saw your piece on Food Bank. We work with local food banks. And Steve's foundation does very similar things within that area. In many ways, they're an exemplar for what we want to be. They work very hard to pay back the community for their success, and that's something we're very keen on doing.
Now, you're building this pretty incredible business, Habu. There's talk that it's going to be a unicorn valuation of £1 billion. You know, chapeau to you if that happens. But you are from humble origins in East London. I remember that when we spoke as well. Tell us your thoughts on this cost of living squeeze. We're seeing inflation rising. You're not just a very successful business leader, but you're at the sharp end of consumers purchasing things. You know, you're somebody with quite a feel on where the economy is, where business is. What's your sense of how hard the next few months are going to be?
Well, we saw this before Christmas. It was really clear that there was a consumer spending crisis, a crisis of confidence primarily, triggered by a fuel crisis that is, you know, there's an own goal, a self-inflicted wound, doesn't need to be happening. And triggered by the last 2 years of shutdown, which I think lots of research currently suggests didn't really need to happen either. So, but we are where we are. We're doing our best for our staff. So we gave lots of staff a significant pay rise, almost a 10% pay rise towards the end of last year. And I think it falls on business leaders and people that run large businesses to do that, to help their staff, to make sure that we are part of the solution and not just part of the problem.
Now, the Bank of England Governor, Andrew Bailey, £500,000 of public sector money in his back pocket every year. Nice work if you can get it. He's telling people that they shouldn't be asking for significant pay rises at a time when inflation's, you know, officially it's at 5.5%. The fine print says 7 or 8% inflation. A lot of people feel a lot more inflation. You're a business leader. You have to balance the books. It's sometimes hard for business, isn't it? Even if they want to give their staff more money.
It's sometimes not possible. It depends very much on the business you're running. I think we should all do what we can. And for some businesses, it won't be possible. But I think leaders like leader of the Bank of England should have a better sense of responsibility than tell employers not to help at a time of what is fundamentally a crisis, an extension of the COVID crisis that I think it could outlive the crisis itself if we don't do something about it.
Well, Martin, great to have you back in the studio. All the best with your business. Keep us informed. Come back and see us soon.
Will do.
And, of course, Stephen Lansdown, co-founder of Hargreaves Lansdown, my latest Money Talks guests. Thanks to both of them. And thanks to you two for joining me here on The Money today as we've examined and will continue to examine this cost of living squeeze. That's all we've got time for. Thanks for joining me. We'll be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Continue us to focus on these fall in living standards, helping you to beat the squeeze here on GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On the Money.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern. 2 named storms in the next 48 hours are likely to bring disruption to many and dangerous wind speeds to some. Storm Dudley later today and then Storm Eunice on Friday. The rain ahead of Dudley already pushing in across much of the UK. Bands of heavy and persistent rain pushing eastwards across northern and western England, Wales, and for a time Scotland and Northern Ireland. That falling as hill snow for the north of Scotland, but with southwesterly winds picking up strength elsewhere, it's actually a very mild day for the vast majority, 15, 16 Celsius possible in the south. Then the spells of rain move through, but the wind really picks up through the evening. 70 and in some places 80-mile-per-hour wind gusts. The worst hit areas, Central Belt, southern Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland and northern England. Risk of disruption from those wind speeds and risk of some damaging wind speeds in some places. It's windy everywhere through the night and there'll be blustery showers, longer spells of rain and hill snow for northern Scotland. And it's going to be cold in the north, but milder further south as we start off the day tomorrow. A bright start, and although it's a windy day again tomorrow, the winds will be coming down following the overnight strengths. And for many, it's a day of sunny spells and blustery showers. Again, hill snow for Scotland. Showers hit and miss elsewhere, with some brighter interludes in between. 11 Celsius in the south for the likes of Southampton and Plymouth. I think 5 to 8 Celsius for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Into Thursday evening then, clear at first. The winds drop away at first, but the next spell of rain starts to move into southwest England, south and west Wales by the evening. And this is Storm Eunice very quickly rushing across the UK, and it's during Friday morning that it's likely to bring damaging and even dangerous wind speeds of 80 to 90 mile per hour for West Wales, South Wales, Bristol Channel coast and southwest coast. And on the northern flank of that low, the likelihood of disruptive snowfall for parts of northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland.
Join me, Isabel Oakeshott, every Friday at noon for my show, The Briefing. We go beyond the headlines, exploring the most important political stories from different angles.
All part of a broader question.
From exclusive interviews with top politicians,
the United Kingdom is made up of people who are resilient.
You just can't take these things personally, right?
To celebrities and experts, we find out what makes the country tick. Every Friday at noon on GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite